Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson. Boy, do we have some good stuff for you today. First, we're going to put into perspective some famous achievements in history. That's always fun. And then I'm going to share the $1 million question. You do not want to miss that. And joining me for those stories and much more is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean. How's your week been?
It's been, the World Championship started this weekend. So I lost the whole weekend.
I watched 10 minutes of it.
There was like 12 hours of it on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That wasn't me. I got to watch Sha'Carri Richardson in the 100. I guess it was the prelims.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I watched all weekend. So,
I would go from one event, and I'd fast forward it until I saw they were about to run another event, and then I'd stop there and watch it. And,
So do you watch the field events?
Yeah, I love the field events.
Do you?
I didn't used to love the field events, but when I started coaching in college and I started coaching field events, and I had to learn about them, now they're so much more interesting to me. So, I kind of like it.
Well, cool.
Some of them aren't as exciting as others, but I do like them.
So week number 2 here in the new podcast studios. I want to throw a kind of a PSA out there. You and I, we go back and forth all the time about the sound, the video quality, because we don't have degrees in any of this stuff.
No.
So we've just kind of learned it and figured it out through the years. So we value input. We value feedback from everybody. So let us know what you think, how we're doing with the sound, the video quality. Right now we're trying to decide, do we need to adjust the lighting a little bit more? The sound is a little bit different in this room. I kind of like it. You're kind of indifferent. So it really all comes down to preference. But if something is just glaring that we don't see or hear, let us know. We really do value input from our podcast family.
Absolutely. Well, how about a Facebook post from last week? This is, the support from the Run Club community, as we know, is really, really, really good. And here's an example of why I say that. Michelle Christensen, she says, prayer request. Runs have been happening during this first week of the new half marathon training cycle, but something is much more important right now than the physical run. I'm reaching out to my Run for God family to pray for the salvation of my 35-year-old cousin, who we just found out is struggling with a rare type of lymphoma in her small intestines that Rochester does not know what to do with. She has 2 little boys and a daughter my Abby's age. I just found out today and saw her this afternoon at the family wedding. She needed people to help her walk, and looks like her grandmother did in her last days. I prayed with her at the wedding tonight for not only her physical healing, but spiritual healing, and that she would be closer to Christ than she's ever been. She cried in my arms more than once tonight and told me how scared she is. She has been running away from the Lord for a long time. Even though I have spoken to her about these things before, I did not feel like we had enough time in the situation that we were in to fully deal with her spiritual condition, and I know I need to get a hold of her as soon as possible and lead her to the Lord. I would truly appreciate your prayers that her heart would be soft to God and that He would do a miracle in her life. Her father, my Uncle Al, would have been 60 years old, and he passed away shortly after I prayed with him for salvation, as well with multiple health issues that also included the intestines. Thank you for reading this message and lifting her up to the Lord. Her name is Heather, and her entire family needs a faith revival and salvation. And then she posts an update later. She said, I finally spoke with my cousin this afternoon, and she accepted Christ as her Lord and Savior. She said a peace came over her after we prayed. As we continued to talk, she suddenly breathed deeply and said, Michelle, I just took a full breath, and it's like a weight coming off my chest. I've never felt this my entire life. And she began to cry. Heaven is rejoicing. Please continue to pray for her physical healing as we celebrate her spiritual healing through Christ. Thank you for your many prayers.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's something we've been saying a lot here lately. There's more than running going on here.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing about this club is, yes, we're all about the sport of running, walking, getting fit, getting our fitness, getting our health in control. But this is where it's at.
Yeah.
This is what sets what we do here apart from any other running endurance club in the world. And this is nothing you or I do. Yeah. This is every bit God. And it's so cool that this is what ties us all together. You know, we talk about this a lot, when, especially the Run Club weekend, when people are coming into town. We have people of all shapes, sizes, socioeconomical backgrounds, upbringings. We are so diverse in this club. Many of these people of which would ever even talk.
Yeah.
Because we may have political differences. We may have the way you raise your kids differences. But the incredible thing is God knits us all together. And I was just talking about something, I'm not going to say what it is, but something that's a cool social experiment in our world today. And this is an example of that.
Yeah.
And so it's just incredible.
It's good stuff. You know, I think that part of the reason why we as runners have this bond, obviously for Christians, it's our faith as well. But runners in general just tend to be a little tighter too. It's sort of like people that go out to war together. You know, they suffer together, and because they suffer together, they have this, they understand each other. And I think it helps deepen all of that. And then, you know, nurses, people like that. Anybody who's been through tragedy together or through tough times together tend to be bonded closer together. And I think that that's why Run Club in general, those bonds seem to get so strong. We understand that what that other person is doing is hard, and it helps. And then when you add on top of that this the spiritual aspect, and us knowing that our fellow person that we've been suffering with also has this other even bigger concern, we just tend to rally around it because it's a great cause and a great reason, right? So if you have a running connection, it's great. You have a spiritual connection, it's even better, and it's so powerful together. So we just need to remember to keep lifting Michelle's cousin Heather up in prayer. It sounds like she still needs it, and hopefully that she'll continue to improve and get better. All right, we had trivia question for last week, and it was the World Athletic Championships are going on right now. It's great. And the question was, what was the first year this event was held? And this was a surprise to me. And the reason why I asked the question is because, you know, the Olympics have been around for well over 100 years. So you would assume that the World Athletic Championships, which is basically the World Track and Field Championships, you would assume that it's probably close to that. Maybe not quite as long, but probably close. But you would be wrong, or I was wrong in my assumption. This is what Wikipedia says about it. The World Championships were started in 1976 in response to the committee dropping the men's 50-kilometer walk from the program, the 1976 Montreal Olympics, despite its constant presence at the Games since 1932. The IAAF chose to host its own World Championship event instead, a month and a half after the Olympics. It was the first World Championships that the IAAF had hosted separately from the Olympic Games, traditionally the main championship for the sport. A second limited event was held in 1980 and the inaugural championships in 1983, with all the events, is considered to be the start of the competition. Until 1980, Olympic champions were also considered as reigning world champions. So what happened was the Olympic Committee decided to pull the 50-kilometer walk out of the Olympic Games, and the walkers didn't like that. And so the walkers said, we're gonna start our own event right after the Olympics, and that became eventually the World Championships. So don't you think it's interesting that the World Track and Field Championships were started by walkers?
Mm-hmm.
How fascinating is that? So when they first came out, it was every 4 years. It was in the years in between the Olympic Games, but now it's every 2 years. So they started in 1991 with every 2 years. It made me think about how many things over the years that we can think of that were started because somebody didn't like something. Mm-hmm. You think about church denominations, right? Mm-hmm. How many church denominations were started because of disagreements or people didn't like the way something was done or whatever? Matter of fact, I just heard yesterday that, and I didn't know this, if it's true, I haven't verified this, but apparently one of the reasons why Baptists are as splintered as they are, and there's so many Baptist groups out there, goes all the way back to slavery. Mm. There were some slavery groups who wanted to continue to endorse slavery, or some Baptist groups, and some that didn't, and so that was part of the reason they split up. I think that's interesting and fascinating, right? But back to track and field. I had no idea that the World Championships actually started the year I graduated from high school. At that age, I'm just assuming, I guess, that they've always been around. I mean, I was paying attention. All I knew was that Sebastian Coe was racing Steve Ovett or Steve Scott, and I just wanted to watch it. That's all I knew. And it goes on to say, in 1913, the IAAF decided that the Olympic Games would serve as the World Championships for athletics. This was considered suitable for over 50 years until the 1960s. The desire of many IAAF members to have their own World Championships began to grow. So it goes on to talk about where the first ones were held, and the first one was held in Helsinki Olympic Stadium, which is where the Olympics were held in 1952, and they wanted to hold it in the same stadium, and so that's where it all started. So what is interesting about all of this is that the United States has dominated the World Championships almost from its inception. There's a few years, there were the Soviet Union years where they were really strong, and a couple of others, but for the most part, the United States has dominated it. But the World Championships were not held in the United States until last year was the first time. 2022 was the first time the World Championships were ever held in the United States.
Really? They weren't held in Oregon ever before?
Nope. Nope. So, I thought that was really interesting. You would assume the United States, it's sort of like you assume soccer goes to these nations where for the World Cup, where people are, they love soccer, but it's not. So there's several events. This, the evolution of track and field to, if you like to talk about equality and all that kind of stuff, well, at one time it was thought that women couldn't run as far as men could. Mm-hmm. And so women weren't even allowed to run marathons back in the 60s for the most part. And then the women's 10K wasn't added to the World Championships until 1987. 1993, the women's triple jump was added. 1995, the 3,000 meters was replaced by the 5K. And then 1999, it wasn't until 1999 that the women's pole vault and hammer throw were added. That's crazy. And then it was 2019 when the mixed 4x4 relay. Did you ever watch that?
Watched it yesterday. I watched it and the hammer throw in Shikari. That's the only thing I watched yesterday.
The
hammer like throw, I don't see how somebody don't get killed.
I know, right?
I don't see how that net stops that hammer, but
there's some pretty substantial nets there. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that mixed 4x4. It's kind of a hokey event. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. I think it might be more interesting when they first came out with it. I think they would allow any leg to run anytime. the last couple of times it's been run, they say, okay, it's women and then men, alternating. But I think it might be more interesting if there was no standard and everybody just, whether you entered the women first two and then the men the last two, or vice versa, or I think that would make it more interesting.
2 men and 2 women.
Yeah. Don't you think it'd make it interesting if we did that? Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, again, it's the World Athletic Championships is interesting. It's 9 days long, so it's lots of track and field. And NBC has it on television. Like, they got everything on. Mm-hmm. Like, almost every minute of the meet, and it's interesting because normally you don't get to see all that, all the qualifying stuff and all of that. You do for like the 100 meters, but you don't for all the other events. So it's been fun to watch.
Yeah.
Do you struggle with motivation to exercise? Are you looking for something that will challenge you and inspire and motivate you? The Run for God Run Club is just what you need to get off the couch and on your way to a fitter, healthier you. Stop trying to get into better shape and do it. With the help and inspiration of thousands of others who are going through the same challenges you face. Whether you're participating in the Couch to Marathon Challenge or just looking for a daily pick-me-up to get active, join the Run for God Run Club today. You can join for as little as 27 cents a day. So what are you waiting for? Get started today at www.runforgod.com. All right, we're back. We need stories. We still need some stories. We do this every week, so we have to have new stories constantly.
And it's not like people don't have them.
Because they do. Everybody's got one, and they need to share it. And I'm sure that you have a story out there. You have an idea for a story. Maybe what you need to share is not necessarily your testimony, but, we've got several that share. The story we're going to talk about today is somebody sharing just kind of some interesting ideas.
Well, even Michelle's, it wasn't really a story that was submitted, but her post. A lot of times, some of these posts that people put on Run Club Social can easily be transferred into a story.
Absolutely.
Michelle's is a good example of that. That is a whole story right there in that little post. So
that's exactly right.
Don't overthink it.
Yep.
Just get your thoughts down on paper, send it to us, and we'll figure out how to format it into the right format for this podcast.
Yep. Don't be shy. All right. Well, it's been hot this summer.
Yeah, it has.
But I had not heard this until recently. Have you heard about the volcano that erupted last year in Tonga or near Tonga?
No.
So this volcano erupted, and when it erupted, the scientists were talking about how much warmer it was going to be this year. So we knew this was coming, but nobody talked about it. And I guess because there was no loss of life or anything like that, nobody really talked about it. But between that and then, of course, if you follow weather at all, you know that anytime the El Nino, which is where the ocean temperatures are warmer in the Pacific, anytime that happens, we get warmer weather in the United States.
But it really, it's been hot, but we haven't really set any records this year.
Well, not here.
I remember the year. I think it was 2009. 2009. I think that's the right year. We had one full week of 100-degree days. Every day it was over 100 degrees. And then that winter, we had one full week where it never got over freezing.
Yeah.
The extremes of that year.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've hit 100 yet this year. I think we are this week. We're going to this week, but I don't think we've hit 100 yet this year.
Yeah, no, I don't think we have either.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, though. Even though we haven't hit 100, there have been days where it's like 90 and
95%.
It feels like it's 112% humidity.
Yeah, that's crazy. The heat index has been over 100 several times.
Way over, yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting because it sounds like we knew this was coming and we didn't. We're still surprised by it. Now, in some places like out, I saw yesterday, I think it was in Oklahoma yesterday, it was 104.
Yeah.
So there's places over in that area of the country that have been crazy warm. So anyway, we're not talking about, we're not making comments on global warming or climate change or anything like that. it's just interesting that we kind of knew this was coming.
We're just kind of belly aching a little bit because it's terrible to run out in it. Right?
Yeah. Which I don't mind so much. All right. Well, how about another story from Jerry Snyder? Always love Jerry's stories, and this week is no exception. He wrote this story called "What Were They Thinking?" As usual, Jerry begins with a quote. At first, people refuse to believe that a strange new thing can be done. Then they begin to hope it can be done. Then they see it can be done. Then it's done, and all the world wonders why it was not done centuries ago. That comes from Francis Hodgson Burnett, author. I live in Lancaster, Ohio. Hop in the car with me. I want you to meet a couple of my thinking out-of-the-box neighbors. Settle back in your seat. The first part of our journey will take about 2.5 hours. 138 miles north of my house near Lake Erie is the town of Milan, Ohio. This is the birthplace of Thomas Alva Edison. Mr. Edison holds 1,093 patents. That happens to be more than any other American. The three most famous of his inventions are the light bulb, the phonograph, and the kinetoscope, which is an early version of a film projector. Let's talk about that light bulb. Nobody seems to know the exact number of tries before he got one that worked. I have seen figures that reported 2,000 and as high as 10,000. It doesn't really matter. At this point, the important thing is that with the flip of a switch, we can light up a room. What fascinates me about Edison is his attitude. He did not look at those thousands of attempts as failures. No, it has been reported that he explained with each new attempt he discovered a way that didn't work. He had a goal and the moxie to hang in there until he found what he was looking for. Of course, I wasn't there, but my guess is he had plenty of folks that thought he was a loon. Maybe even some that offered him a candle and told him to quit wasting his time. You've probably met a couple of people like that when you told them you were going to run a marathon race or announced some other project that was going to take you out of your comfort zone. Now let's jump back in the car. We'll be traveling 170 miles southwest to Dayton, Ohio, where we're going to meet the Wright brothers. Orville Wright and his younger brother Wilbur sold and repaired bicycles. By all accounts, they were doing pretty well. But they had bigger plans. They wanted to fly. Like Thomas Edison, I'm sure the Wright brothers had a bunch of naysayers telling them that flying should be left to the birds. They are credited with flying the world's first successful motor-operated airplane December 17th, 1903. Time to jump back in the car for a ride home. Thanks for traveling with me. Perhaps you'll be inspired by my neighbors, Thomas, Wilbur, and Orville. They listened to their heart and lived their dream. I hope you do the same. Chinese proverb, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those doing it.
I love that proverb.
I do too. I do too. As usual, Jerry shares something that we already knew these stories, but they're just two really good examples of where conventional wisdom would tell us it can't be done, and then they did it anyway, and they were just determined to do it. I thought this was it. I spent some time studying Edison recently, and do you know Edison did not discover the light bulb? What he discovered was an affordable way to make a light bulb. There were light bulbs made before Thomas Edison came up with his, but they were very expensive and they didn't last long, so they were not practical. He came up with the first practical light bulb.
Yeah, it was a race between him and, was it Westinghouse?
Well, that was the AC-DC battle.
That's right.
Between AC and DC. Yeah, and Edison was on the wrong end of that one. Yeah. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. That now the part about Edison trying like 10,000 different ways to try a light bulb, that was all true.
Yeah.
But the fact is that he didn't actually discover the light bulb, but he just made it where it would work. So how can you apply that lesson? You know, if you have doubt that you can run a marathon, well, just look at the people who have done it, right? And figure out a way to get yourself across that finish line. It's like Edison did. And then with Orville and Will were right. People really thought they were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about, what do you mean you're going to fly?
Yeah, and I mean, it really comes down to how do you handle or how do you process negativity, naysayers, people that say it can't be done. Mm-hmm. You either let it crush you or you use it to propel you.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't mind it when people say I can't do something. I take it as a challenge, and it fuels me. Some people, it does the opposite. It kind of crushes their spirit, and I don't know how you change that. But I think you fall on one side or the other.
Yeah.
Of that. I think you can change that. I'm just saying I don't know how. It's all 6 inches between your ears. It's how you process it. It's kind of like, can you run a marathon? Yes, if you think you can.
Yeah.
If you don't think you can, chances are you can't. What was that? Was it Henry Ford that said that? Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right.
Yep.
It's a mindset.
Have you ever been out to Kill Devil Hills where the first flight was?
No.
When you see it and where it was and where it took off and where it landed, you look at it and go, that's it.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a big deal, but it was a big deal. But it was. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like the person who is running a 5K or in the 5K challenge, and that first time they run 20 minutes. It's like 20 minutes of running is not all that spectacular, but it is for that person. Right. And it leads to bigger things later on.
But it's for this reason, going all the way back to the quote at the very beginning. At first, people refuse to believe that a strange new thing can be done. Then they begin to hope it can be done. They see it can be done. Then all the world wonders why it hadn't been done centuries ago. That's kind of how, and I think you and I differ a little bit here. It's why I think the sub 2 hour marathon, I think it's imminent. And it's because, yes, Kipchoge had everything perfectly aligned, but he did it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the 4 minute mile, I believe in that quote that once you see somebody do it, it's kind of why we always talk about the first class, second class of Run for God. First class is usually small, the second class is usually much bigger, and it's because people are sitting on the sidelines saying, if that person can do it, who looks like me, sounds like me, runs in the same circles I do, if they can do it, then I'll do it next time. And they do it.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much, really anything we do can be infectious.
Yeah.
And it's for that reason that I do think the 2 hour marathon is going to be broken, within the next 5 or 10 years. I really feel that way.
I think it'll eventually get broken. I'm just not sure how soon it'll get broken. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a minute and a half off now, so that's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of 26.2 miles.
And the idea that somebody has done it.
Yes.
Now you can argue all day long about the circumstances, but at the end of the day, it was done.
That's right.
So
for sure. 1 Peter 4:10 says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace." Man, there's a lot in that verse. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's what Edison and the Wright brothers were doing. They had this vision, they had this ability to see things that other people couldn't see, to see possibility in areas where other people didn't see possibilities. And the truth is, we all have some kind of that was their gift. Their gift was to be kind of a visionary and be creative and try to figure out ways to do that. But we all have a gift, and I get so frustrated at people who claim, well, I don't have a gift, because I hear it all the time. I'm sure you do too.
Sure.
And the truth is, we all have some kind of a gift. I mean, maybe do you enjoy talking with older people? Mm-hmm. Well, go and visit nursing homes. That may be a gift that you have, right? To most people, they look at that and they go, well, that's not really a gift. Yes, it is. Because I can't do that. Right. I'm not good at that. I would never be good at that.
See, I love it. I love talking to older people.
You would be great at it. Yeah. Me, I'm me. I'm not going to be good at that. So, but there's all sorts of things like that. We got, somebody at the church who keeps up with a prayer list. They're organized and can pull in all these things and put all these things together. You got people, there's one lady at church who buys almost everybody in the church on their birthday. She'll buy them some kind of little trinket.
You've talked about her before.
Yeah. I mean,
The impact that makes on you is obvious.
Yeah, see? Yeah, that's right. And it makes an impact on others too. And all you have to do is find something out there that you enjoy doing, that you're good at, that you can make an impact for others, particularly in the, as it relates to Christ.
Sure.
Right? Proverbs 3:6. In all ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths.
We actually read Jerry's story as a family last night because I knew, and I hadn't even read it yet. I just knew Jerry always has some really good ones. So we read it as a family last night. And we talked about the idea of doing things that stretch you, that are out of your comfort zone, that you're gonna have naysayers, things that are hard. And I told my two boys, I said, always be doing something that meets all those criteria. Now, don't be trying to do 5 of those things all the time, but always have something in the hopper that you're working on that is bigger than you, because that is where growth really happens.
Yeah.
That is where faith really happens. Now, I wasn't saying be reckless,
Right.
but doing big things that are out of your comfort zone that people say can't be done for the most part, aren't reckless things. You can be reckless in that aspect, but always have something that you're working on, because when you reach those milestones, because this is where you should look back. You can look back on your life and you can see these big things. I went through mine last night, my list. Holly went through some of her things. The boys went through some of their things, even though they haven't been on this earth very long. But you look back and it gives you confidence, number one, but it also makes you realize you see where God was in all those points. And looking back on that gives you the confidence and the faith to go forward in the next things. But the most important part is this Proverbs 3:6, and always acknowledge him.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that it was God. It wasn't Mitchell. It wasn't Lane. It wasn't Landon. It wasn't Holly. It was God at all those touch points, because I know, just like with this ministry, this was not me. It wasn't you. We're not smart enough. It was God. And I think we're pretty good about acknowledging that. But seeing what God has done through this ministry, if we look back and we study it, it will give us the faith and the confidence to do the next big thing that God's laying in front of us. Problem is, a lot of times we don't look back and we don't pick the thing up that God's given us right in front of us. God will always stretch you. And if you don't have something in your life right now that is doing those things, it's stretching you, it's out of your comfort zone, it's something people say can't be done, chances are you're just not picking up what God's laying in front of you, because God will stretch you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good word. Deuteronomy 16:15 says, "The Lord your God will bless you in all you produce, and in all the work of your hands, and you will have abundant joy." This is the story where God's telling the Israelites how they needed to follow these 3 main festivals. You got the festival of the unleavened bread, the festival of weeks, and the festival of tabernacles. These were like celebrations to God, right? And what he's saying is each man should bring with him a gift in proportion to how much he's been blessed. Is that that's convicting, isn't it? When you think about, how could I possibly bring something to God that's in proportion to how much he blessed me? Well, that's a deep thought, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
And I thought about that. What would I bring to show God how much I've been blessed? It's really an overwhelming thought. Of course, back, it was different with the sacrifices and all that. There was a way to measure that, I guess, in that time. Today, there's really not, right? But we need to celebrate how God has blessed us, and we know we can never repay God. We can never bring him back anything big enough to satisfy, to equal the way he's blessed us. But we can acknowledge and understand and be appreciative for the way that he has blessed us.
Yeah.
Question: What do you say to a friend who has what seems to be an impossible goal? My first question is, impossible to me or him? Because most of the time, that's what I see. I see it with athletes all the time. An athlete who doesn't believe they can do a thing, and I can look at them and I know they can. And they just, in their mind, can't get their brain wrapped around it. So I think that depends on when you talk about an impossible goal, who's defining impossible in that moment? Because so many people have a hard time believing in themselves. And, the way I am, I'll never lie to somebody. I won't tell. I remember one time there was a guy, he wanted his daughter to run really fast to break a state record, and the state record was was faster than I thought she could do. And he came to me and said, "Do you think you can train her to run this fast?" And I said, "No, I don't think I can," because I don't think she can do that. I think that's outside of her, what she has the ability to do. And he got mad at me because it was like, well, you can do anything you put your mind to. And I'm like, it's within limits. But so I try to be real honest with people. And if I tell you I think you can do something, I'm sure you can. I'm sure of it. So that's the question is, who believes it? So when you got a friend out there who looks at you and says they believe you can do something, take a more serious look at it. If you think you can't, you know what I mean? You think you can't, then maybe you should look at that.
The problem is a lot of times the people who you're allowing to speak into your life have no basis by which for what they're saying.
That's true.
Lane brought up last night. He said that he had one friend. Lane's got some pretty big goals, even still with the sport of triathlon, and one of his friends told him it just wasn't going to happen. And
there's some good fuel.
Lane kind of pushed back and said, "Well, why do you think that?" And the friend couldn't give an answer.
Yeah.
On the flip side, he was talking to one of his friends, and he was speaking some stuff into him, and he said, "This is what I think you can do." And the friend pushed back on Lane, but Lane had this, and here's the things. It's just like the dad you were talking to. I know the situation you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, you could point to, she doesn't put the work in, so she's not, that's kind of the starting point.
Yeah.
And you need to be careful with whom you let speak into your life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because most of the time, especially the naysayers, they have no basis. They're predicting what you can do based on what they think they can do. And it's like that quote, that Chinese proverb that you just said, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those doing it. That is, most of the time, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
You have somebody that just wants to rain on your parade, and they're trying to squash your goals. Unbeknownst to them, for a lot of people, it's actually fueling them.
Yeah.
But I just throw that out there to say you really need to be careful, because if somebody can't articulate why they think what they think about what you're doing, then you need to tune them out.
That's a good point. Real good point. Another question. Have you ever bit off more than you could chew? What made you do it? How did it turn out?
I don't think you and I have ever done this.
Late today.
I'd say for me, today is, I'm right in the thick of it right now. Yeah, I mean, I think biting off more than you can chew is not necessarily a bad thing. It's going back to, are we constantly pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone? Some people would define that as, well, that's biting off more than you can chew. No, that's me getting outside my comfort zone, because I look back 5 years at what I thought was way more than I can chew, and that's nothing.
Yeah.
If you're constantly stretching, it's I remember when I set a goal of doing 12:15 in the Ironman.
Yeah.
That was more than I could chew.
Yeah.
But when you come up beside me on that run, that was no longer more than I could chew. It was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's all perspective. It's everything about Jerry's story here is It's simply how you look at things, the confidence you have, and the faith in Christ you have.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered that question or not, because sometimes it turns out great, and sometimes it's a train wreck for me.
Yeah, you know what I can't help but think about is the idea that you and I have said this for years. You never know how far you can go until you try to go too far. Mm-hmm. And when I think it's good to know where those limits are. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes it's a good thing to take a bigger bite than you can chew, because I think sometimes we just need to deal with the uncomfortableness of trying to continue to chew and
because
get
what's
it down.
The flip side of it? The flip side is all these athletes that we know their talent. We know what they're capable of, and it's way more than they think.
Yeah.
And so they're constantly holding themselves back because they don't think they can do it, when the people that really care and the people that they should be letting speak into their life, they won't listen to.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I can't run a marathon. Well, yes, you can. Almost everybody listening to this podcast right now can run a marathon.
Right.
Now, whether you want to or not, that may be a different story, but don't Lane made the comment last night, that's a cop-out.
That's a good way
to say I can't do it. Don't use that language.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you don't want to and you're using I can't as an excuse. Don't allow yourself to do that. That's just a bad practice. Say, I don't want to. At this season in my life, I'm not running.
Yeah.
My knees may say a little bit to do with that, but at the end of the day, I don't want to. I'm walking right now, and that's fine. It's when we fall back on that I can't, that just bleeds over to every other area of your life, and you start saying, I can't do this, I can't make it to church, I can't read my Bible because I'm just too busy. It's infectious. Don't let yourself do that.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. Last question. How do you respond to people who seem to take joy in raining on your parade, telling you it can't be done? We've already answered that.
God loves you.
Yeah. I like for somebody to tell me I can't do something. I just frankly just like it because it's watch this. That's my whole attitude toward that. And you're right. I wished we had a way of getting that, being able to pass that on to other people. It would make I think about the high school cross country team. There's so many of those kids who don't know what they can do. Mm-hmm. And if they just had that belief in themselves, it could be a game changer.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you transfer that, but most people, I don't know. What do you think the percentage is of people who believe they can do hard things versus people who think they can't do anything hard?
That's a hard question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would think it's pretty evenly split.
Probably so.
Because you look at people who think they can. If you take the person who you say, hey, what do you think about the idea of a marathon? And they just jump right in and they say, I can do it. Chances are that person does that with other things in their life.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, and this is the question I don't know the answer to. I said it with the first question. How do you change that in a person? How do you take a person who's a naysayer? Because if they're a naysayer about the things you can't do, they're also a naysayer about the things they can't do.
Yeah.
They're the people that say, I can't.
Yep.
How do we change that? Because it's a game changer for somebody's life, for their walk with Christ. Because they're also the people, maybe I'm stepping out in the territory I'm going to get in trouble for here, but they're also saying, well, God's calling me to do that, but I can't do that. Well, yeah, you're right. You can't, but God can. But they'll never let it get to that point. How do you change that? If you're a person out there, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, it's kind of the way I am, how do you change that?
Yeah, I don't know. All we can do is try to be as positive and uplifting and try to, I guess you're trying to talk them into it, right?
Yeah.
Into believing in themselves. And
pray for boldness, I guess. That's really what it comes down to is boldness.
Yeah, you're right.
And Christ calls us to be bold.
Absolutely.
And that starts in our walk with Him.
Amen.
Would you like to experience the Bible in a different way than you've ever done before? Well, you can join me, Coach Dean, as I read through the entire Bible every day for a full year. You don't want to miss hearing this transplanted Southern boy try to pronounce those biblical names now, do you? It may be good for a laugh. In addition, I share running and walking tips and some inspirational quotes along the way. Get your daily dose of the Bible from a runner's perspective in the Run for God Run Club, a walk through the Bible. You must be a member of the Run Club to get access. So if you're not a member, join today. If you are a member, just find a walk through the Bible under the Nationwide Challenge tab.
So I read this from Canadian Running Magazine, which has a lot of good articles. But this one is a recent study. That's right. Another study.
I'm thinking about Canadian. I mean, I don't even read American Running Magazine. You're reading Canadian
absolutely.
Running Magazine.
Yeah. I read some Kenyan ones too. They said that moderately active people tend to have a positive influence on their friends, which I think we would probably assume that's true.
Yeah.
But this is like I said, it's a study, and it's really good news for those of us who have friends or relatives who are sedentary, and we would like to see them get some exercise in. And the study by a group called Plus One, I'm not sure how you say it. I looked up the organization and my head almost exploded. They look like there's way too much brain power for me. But it showed that when sedentary people hang out with moderately active people, they tend to become more active.
But they're just stating the obvious.
Well,
right?
I think so. But
I mean, you become who you hang out with.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I think it goes the other way too sometimes. I think that if you hang out with people who are not as active, you can fall into bad habits that way too, probably.
Well, yeah, you become who you hang out with.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I am about studies.
Yeah. Well, it did talk about, it kept using the phrase moderately active, because I wonder if somebody hanging out with somebody like me just turns them off.
They're just annoyed.
Yeah, just like, yeah, that's ridiculous. You know,
because that's all he ever talks about.
Yeah. You got to wonder.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. And it's why it's so important that you pay attention to who you hang around, what you listen to, what the inputs that you allow in your life, because it will affect who you are, period.
Well, yeah, and it definitely affects, particularly with exercise, it definitely affects the amount of exercise you do, because during the pandemic, the average person who exercised actually did less during the pandemic, which I can't understand myself, because I'm like, that was an opportunity to do more. Mm-hmm. You know, you had more time on your hands. But so many people, because they couldn't meet with other people to do what they do, just didn't do it.
Sure.
And that's a terrible reaction.
Yeah.
We should go the other way. When we have that opportunity, we should seize that opportunity to do more. But anyway, this article gives us some tips on getting our sedentary friends to be more active. And these are the things they said. They said, and these seem obvious, but plan active get-togethers. You know, make sure that you have activities planned, that, you know, when you get together, you're not just sitting around, but you're doing things. And, you know, that could be anything. Go for a walk, go for a hike, just play cornhole, whatever it takes to
get moving.
To get them moving. Yeah. Another one, try something new together. So get your sedentary friends to try that. You know, you're not going to run a marathon together, maybe, but you can try some other thing that you've been wanting to try that's going to get you out and get you active, and because you'll pique their interest as well. So that's a good way to do it. And then the other thing is talk about your running or walking, but don't do it too much. So it's good to talk about it. It's good for them to hear about it, but you just don't want to get too overwhelming with it. And typically they'll kind of latch on.
And never talk This is where I think some people mess up, is they start using language like, you need to do this.
Yes.
The best way to talk about it is, man, I've been walking lately, or I've been running lately, and I feel so much better. Talk about what it's doing. It's kind of like your testimony. You don't go up to somebody and say, you're going to hell, you need Jesus. There's applications where that can work, but by and large, it's why our testimonies are so powerful.
Yep.
Here's what God has done in my life, and that is attractive to people.
Yep, for sure. Good stuff. All right, it's time for Dean's Thoughts. That's a time when I share something that I've written about the intersection between running and faith. Well, are you ready for it? It's the most profound question you will hear today. Maybe this week, maybe this month, maybe even this year. It's called the $1 million question. I have crashed and burned in more than one marathon. I can remember feeling so bad, I wondered if I could even make it to the finish line. Of course, I did. But at mile 22, I really felt like I might not make it. After my first open water swim, I had real doubts as to whether I could cover the 2.4 miles I would have to swim in my upcoming Ironman triathlon. At that point, I had never been in a pool for more than 45 minutes, and that first open water experience was harrowing enough for me to doubt my ability to be in the ocean for over an hour. Both the triathlon and the marathon experiences were mentally tough thoughts in my head that I had to conquer if I was going to get to the corresponding finish lines. Since then, I have developed what I think is a foolproof way to feel more positive about my ability to do those difficult things. Now I can just ask the $1 million question. I'm going to share the $1 million question with you, and you're going to think, why didn't I think of that? It is so simple, yet so powerful. If you are one who doubts yourself regularly, this $1 million question could change your life if you let it. So, what's the $1 million question? Well, I've already given it away. But if you didn't catch it, here it is. If you're unsure if you can accomplish a thing, ask yourself this question: could I do it for $1 million? Now, you're either hearing the most profound question you've ever heard, or you need more explanation to understand why this question is so powerful. You see, for most of us, $1 million would change your life. I know money isn't everything. I completely agree with that statement. If I didn't, I wouldn't be working for a nonprofit organization. But $1 million would fundamentally change my life. That's just a fact. Even if I took that $1 million and used it to fortify the very ministry I work for, it would have a huge impact. Of course, if you're in debt, how life-changing would it be to pay off all your debt? I could go on and on, but you get the point. When you take a few minutes to think about it, $1 million would fundamentally change your life. Now, let's go back to that thing you're not sure you can do. If there were truly something in front of you that would fundamentally change your life, do you think you could do it? The answer to that question tells you all you need to know. If you have been telling yourself you can't do something, look at it through the $1 million question lens. Do you think you could do it now? I thought you could. If the $1 million proposition really doesn't set well, you could insert anything into the same slot. How about this one? What if I could have 1 hour with my mother who passed away years ago? Could I finish that marathon then? I bet I could run through a brick wall at the finish line for that one. Maybe you have another substitute question you could use. How about another hypothetical? What if every time you shared Jesus with someone, God came down from heaven, gave you a high five, and said, "Well done"? Imagine He does that even in those times when you're completely rejected. How many times a day would you be sharing Jesus with others? Well, God isn't going to stand in front of us and give us a high five, at least not physically. But doesn't He do it in spirit? Don't we believe that the Holy Spirit overwhelms us in those moments when we're obedient to God? Well, we say we do. I want you to understand that I have just stomped on my own toes so hard it may be difficult to run today. But if we truly believe in the power of God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus' story and its ability to change the world, why are we not sharing it daily? Some people do not like hypothetical questions, but they can be awfully powerful. And asking them often reveals how we truly think. If you can make that open water swim with $1 million on the line, then you can make that open water swim. If you could share Jesus with everyone around you if God came and thanked you in person, then you can share Jesus with everyone around you. The difference is that no one is going to offer you $1 million to swim, but God is going to be thankful for your willingness to be obedient to His call.
It's a great story, Dean.
Ooh, that's a powerful
thought. Knocked it out of the park again.
That's it's just an amazing thought of whenever you think you can't do something, just think about.
Maybe this is the answer to the question I was asking earlier.
That's exactly.
How do you change somebody's perspective?
Yeah,
and this is it. You kind of have to reverse engineer it.
Yeah. I was trying to think of an example of something that I would think maybe felt impossible, and I was thinking about, you ever seen anybody shoot a basketball from the opposite free throw line? It's like it's a long way, right? And I don't even know if I could throw a basketball that far, but I'd try it for hours and hours if I knew there was $1 million on the line, you know what? And I'll bet I would make it eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of heightens, I've talked about on here, I listen to Dave Ramsey quite a bit, and he does this a lot. People will call in, and the one that sticks out in my mind is people that have the money to pay their house off, but they don't want to pay their house off because maybe they have a 4% interest rate, and they're saying, I can earn 10% in the market. And he always he does a great job of flipping it around on. He says, okay, well, by your logic, would you go out and borrow $10 million today at 4% and invest it in the stock market? And the people just quickly say, no way. And he says, but why is it any different?
Yeah.
It's just smaller. And he always heightens it. And it's the same way here. Heightening the situation will often bring a smaller situation into focus for us. And that's exactly what you're doing here. If the stakes were high enough, you could do it. So the answer to the question, can you do it, is yes.
Yeah.
Period. So that's, I mean, you've done the same thing, and it's you did a perfect job of doing it in our everyday task.
Yeah, you can't, if you can do it for whatever reason, whatever it is, whether it's the $1 million or it's, like I said, the idea of thinking, if I could run 1,000 miles and I could get 1 hour with my mother at the end of that 1,000 miles, you better believe I could run 1,000 miles.
Sure.
I guarantee you.
Yeah.
Because it would drive me to do it. And so that means that I can run 1,000 miles, period. Yeah.
So I guess the answer, or the statement that I want to kind of put out there, is there are very few things that come across your plate in life that you can't do. There's very few. It's just, are you willing to do the hard thing?
Yeah.
To do it for a long period of time, which it may require. A lot of people say, I'm not musically talented. I can't play an instrument. Yes, you can. Yeah. Yep. What is it? Malcolm Gladwell's book says 10,000 hours of almost anything, and you're going to master it.
Yeah.
And the question is, are you willing to put the 10,000 hours in? Now, the answer may be no.
Right.
I'm not willing to do that, but let that be your answer, not I can't.
That's right.
So it's yet another example of Dean's thoughts and the story
meshing
just
together.
Tying right together. Yep. And you don't plan
it was
any
not
of it.
intentional.
Yeah.
No.
Crazy.
I have a confession to make. When I was writing this, when I wrote the sentence, don't we believe that the Holy Spirit overwhelms us in those moments when we're obedient to God? I just broke down.
You texted me and told me that.
Yeah. I was just, I mean, it hit me so hard, because the truth is that God is right there with us. And if we're not sharing Christ with other people, what are we doing, right? And when we know that there's somebody out there that needs to hear it, I'm still impacted to this day of a guy that came into, I think I've talked about this maybe many podcasts ago, but a guy that came into fast break athletics in Chattanooga years ago. I mean, this was probably at least 10 years ago. This was back, they were 2 buildings ago. They've moved into 2 different other buildings since then. And I just remember this guy coming in there, and he had this spirit about him, and all he wanted to do was tell people about Jesus. And that's all he wanted to do. And he wasn't being, you know, a lot of people were looking at him like, the guy's a little crazy. But you could feel his heart in what he was doing. He was like, I got this great news I want to share with everybody. And I thought, man, that's the way I want to be. I want to be that guy. Now, not necessarily sharing it the way he was doing it, you know, just being open to everybody, but yeah, to some degree, right?
We need a little more of that.
Well, you're not kidding.
You know that moment when you're running and you settle into that perfect pace, and then the next song comes on? Don't let that happen again. With the new J Radio, you can trust us to make sure that the next song in your playlist will help you keep up that pace. Check out the Radioactive station on J Radio for all different genres of workout music, handpicked for you while you run. Start listening now at jradio.com.
All right, every week I share a reason why running and or walking is so awesome. And how about this? Not only is it a great social connector, but as you've heard today, it helps non-active people become active. So what a great way, people love to share time with other people. We all like to do that, right? And running and walking is a great way to do it. And it's a good way to encourage our friends who maybe are sedentary. I was talking with somebody this week, and I asked them, this was a young person, and I said, what do you think is probably health-wise is the worst condition you could have or you could be doing? And he said, well, I don't know, smoking? I'm like, nope, there's something worse than smoking. And he went through and he guessed a few things. I said, no, it's obesity. Obesity makes there's 10 different types of cancer that you're more likely to get if you're obese. We don't even think about from a cancer standpoint. We think about heart disease and all these, and diabetes and these other things. But it's so important, not for the way we look, but for the way how healthy we are. And walking gives us a great connection to encourage people to get out there and to not have to live that lifestyle.
Yeah, and the sad thing is it's kind of, and the bad thing is, and I'm going to be completely transparent, when you said it, I was like,
right.
Why do we have that reaction in our society? Because obesity, if you're out there and you're obese, this is not talking down to you. It's saying it is a true condition in our society that is almost being promoted.
Yeah.
And you've talked about it before. COVID was such an opportunity to change that, because COVID hit obese people harder. That's just truth.
Yeah.
We need to, when we talk about being obese, there's no making fun of it. It's a condition that you can change. The problem is society has done exactly this, going back to our whole conversation here. People have got it in their head that they can't change it.
That's right.
And you can.
You can.
Get out the door and start walking. It's that simple. You don't have to have a huge plan. You don't have to have, it's not about running a marathon. It's not about being the fastest. It's about simply putting the remote down or the phone down and going outside and start walking. And within days, you'll start to feel a difference.
Yep.
And we need to share that hope with people, because there's some people who are chronically obese. I mean, they're morbidly obese, and they think there is no hope.
Yeah.
But there is, and it can start this afternoon.
Yeah, and I like to think of it as more of a compassion thing. You know, I got a phone call from my brother last week. My brother has been well over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
And I got a phone call from him last week telling me he just went to the doctor, got his checkup. He was telling me about his numbers. He's lost 60 pounds. And
wow, good for him.
Yeah, and I mean, just did my heart good. And you know what he said to me? He said, I felt, when we talked about it last time, he said, I felt how much you cared and wanted to see me lose this weight. And I thought, that's exactly the way I felt, right? It's exactly the way I felt. I don't want him to go through life that way, because I know what it did to my mother.
Right.
And I know that he's headed down that same path if he doesn't make a change. And he's making a change, and it's fantastic. And it's not, I was never looking down on him. I was always, dude, come on, man. Let's do something. Whatever I can do to help you, we need to do something.
But society says that's judgmental, and that's just wrong.
It's not.
Period.
It's not. It's compassionate is what it is. That's right. All right. Well, I'm not sure where this story happened, but it's hilarious in my opinion. There's a lady who runs 5 miles every morning at 5 a.m., and her neighbors are not happy with her. And they're not happy with her because she sets off their security lights and cameras and their dogs when she goes running at 5 a.m. And these people apparently are just piling on this lady. You know, the Nextdoor app, which can be toxic.
I don't get on it.
But they're just piling on this lady because she's going out and running at 5 a.m. every morning. And I guess, I don't know, looking at it from their side, I guess they look at it the same as somebody who's mowing their grass at 5 a.m. You wouldn't do that and disturb your neighbors, so why would you go out? But the truth is, I mean, running is different, you know, and the fact that alarms are set off or whatever is...
That's not on her.
That's a you problem.
You've got too many cameras. We have too many cameras in society nowadays.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, she's not doing it. She's being quiet, running up and down the road. If your things are being set out, that's why you put them in. So why are you offended? I don't know.
And if it's your dog that's starting to bark, well, that's your dog.
It's your dog.
Yeah. Well, there was some funny.
Better yet, get out and join her.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, there were several different. Somebody said you need to change your security settings. Somebody said she's not breaking the law. Somebody said she should buy them all Pepto-Bismol if it hurts their tummy. And then my favorite comment was this. People set up a device to wake them up anytime something moves at 5 a.m. Then they're enraged when they are woken up at 5 a.m. anytime something moves. My neighborhood is full of people like this. Hilarious. I love that. Yeah, that's
Yeah, there's cameras everywhere nowadays.
There are cameras everywhere. We've got them at our house. We've got security cameras, but I don't have an alarm that goes off if
I don't have an alarm. I don't have a security camera. I don't even have a dog outside the boat. Of course, we live in an area of the country where you don't really. The biggest crime. Just right here in Cohutta, of all places, the big crime when we were moving in here is there's a restaurant across the street and someone stole the grease.
Yeah, out of their grease trap.
Ain't no place like Cohutta. I mean, really. So that's the extent of our crime around here, which is a blessing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's a lot of cameras out there.
Good stuff.
And all the cameras that are right here in Cohutta, nobody caught them.
Yeah.
There's probably 10 cameras on this building right here. Nobody caught the grease thief.
That's awesome. Well, somebody asked this question. What are some things you have done that are non-running related that have helped your running? And I skimmed through the answers, and I noticed a pattern when I skimmed through all those answers. There were a lot of very specific answers. Go for a ride a bike twice a week, weight training, core strength, stuff like that. But they all fall under one thing, cross training. And you should do more than just run or walk, whatever it is. Do something a little bit more than that. Now, if that's all you have time for, that's all you can do, that's great. That's great. It's better that than nothing. But doing some kind of cross-training thing will make your running or your walking more enjoyable because you'll be a little bit more fit, particularly when you do something that's different, completely different. Weightlifting is real, especially as you get older like me. And whether it's weightlifting or just strength training in general, is very helpful to keeping your body good and healthy. So yeah, I noticed that's what. Of course, there's lots of other things too. Sleep, diet, things like that can change your running as well, your walking as well. But we know those things, and we just don't do it. Right. I just don't understand why we just don't do it. It's a lot like our spiritual life, isn't it? Where we know what to do sometimes, and we just don't do it.
Well, and I kind of the first thing I thought of when you asked that question wasn't cross-training. It was scheduling. Yeah. If you're one of those people that are you constantly using the excuse that I just don't have time, well, make the time and put, as hokey as it sounds, go for a run or go for a walk. Block out an hour in your day and put it on your calendar.
Yep.
I've had to do that in the past, especially when I was training for some events and things. So do whatever you got to do to make it a priority, because just like we've talked all through this podcast, it's worth it.
It is worth it. Yep. Well, finally, I don't know what they're putting in the water in Norway. Jakob Ingebrigtsen is, he made, you didn't see him running. He made it through the 1,500 meter first round. And while he's coming down the straightaway, he's looking up at the crowd, telling them to cheer.
I don't care for that.
He's right in the middle of this pack, right? And yeah, he's borderline. He's borderline annoying sometimes. Yeah. But Noah Lyles, of course, he won the 100. He's a lot like that, but Noah Lyles is a little bit different. He's a little more under control.
Yeah, I told you before we started the podcast that I did watch Sha'Carri Richardson in the first round of the 100, and she got a line. She's going with the wig now, and she just looked like she was being focused. They had that false start, and she just kind of turned her back and seemed to stay focused, nothing flashy. Even on the run, she kind of did a little thing as she crossed the finish line, but not the obnoxious Sha'Carri. And I thought, maybe this is a new page for Sha'Carri. Even 75% through the interview after, she was, kind of gracious. But then right there at the end, I forget what she said, but she threw something in there. But maybe she's changing.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
She's a very talented athlete.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she could do a lot of good.
Absolutely.
With her platform. Well,
and Noah Lyles, he won the 100, and afterwards they were interviewing him, and he said, they were like, well, nobody expected you to win, and he's like, nobody except me. I expected to win.
That's a great answer.
It is a good answer, isn't it? And that's why
the naysayer. He don't listen to the naysayer.
No, and he's pretty cocky about stuff, but at the same time, it's like Usain Bolt was that way. Usain Bolt was supremely competent.
Yeah,
but he did it in a good way.
Yeah,
and there's a really fine line there, and I don't know how you determine where that fine line is.
So if you're listening, we also have a train next door at our new podcast studio, so you've probably just heard the train go by, but it's great. I love it. So just bear with us. Sometimes you're going to hear a train.
It's all
but there's no
good.
place like Cahutta.
It's all good. All right. Well, let me leave you with a trivia question for next week. Name the 6-time Olympic medalist who was named Sports Illustrated Greatest Female Athlete of the 20th Century. That's a pretty impressive title. Greatest Female Athlete of the 20th Century. And if you know the answer to that, you can send it to dean@runforgod.com. And if you're the first person to answer that and send that to me, you will win $20 off in the Run for God store. Free cash. Good stuff.
I think I might know it? Maybe.
Don't say it.
I'm not.
All right. I'm going to leave you with this motivational thought of the week. It is better to have lived one day as a tiger than 1,000 years as a sheep. That's a Tibetan saying. I like that. Sometimes you just need to be a tiger. Being a sheep's okay occasionally, but not too often. As a sheep, Now, if you're following Jesus,
I was going to say, there's
a good time to be a
flip side
sheep.
to that. Yeah.
But there's also times to be a tiger too.
Yeah.
Go out and go after stuff, right? Even if it's just temporary. The Wright brothers didn't even cover the length of a 747 on their first flight. But can you imagine how incredible that was when they did it? They were being tigers at that point, right? All right, 179 episodes in the books, and we're so thankful for you. If you're out there listening, we can't thank you enough for letting us do something that we enjoy doing.
Sure.
It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, until next week, may God bless every step of every run. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.